Suffering is universal. Every human being who has ever lived has experienced pain, loss, disappointment, and distress. We get sick. We lose people we love. We fail at things that matter to us. We watch our bodies age and deteriorate. We face rejection, betrayal, loneliness, and fear. No amount of wealth, success, or achievement can completely shield us from the basic difficulties of being human. Most of us spend our lives trying to avoid suffering or escape from it when it arrives. We build elaborate strategies to prevent pain, create insurance policies against loss, and construct philosophies that promise us happiness if we just follow the right steps. We consume endless books, courses, and therapies that promise to eliminate our suffering and deliver us to a state of permanent contentment. But what if this entire approach is based on a fundamental misunderstanding? What if suffering isn't a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be understood? What if the very attempt to escape suffering is what creates most of our suffering? What if the truth about suffering is not how to avoid it, but how to relate to it in a completely different way? This is what Alan Watts discovered through his deep study of Eastern philosophy and his own direct experience of life's inevitable difficulties. He saw that what we call suffering actually has two distinct components, and understanding this distinction is the key to freedom. There's pain, which is unavoidable, and there's suffering, which is optional. There's the first arrow of what happens to us, and the second arrow of our resistance to what happens to us. Think about it this way. When you stub your toe, there's the immediate physical pain. That's unavoidable. That's what happens when nerve endings detect damage and send signals to your brain. But then there's everything that comes after that initial pain. The anger at yourself for being clumsy, the frustration that this happened at the worst possible time, the fear that you might have seriously injured yourself, the story about how these things always happen to you. That second layer, the mental and emotional reaction to the pain, is what creates most of our actual suffering. The physical pain might last for a few seconds or minutes, but the psychological suffering can go on for hours, days, or even years. We replay the incident, blame ourselves or others, worry about future implications, and create elaborate narratives about what it all means. This is what Watts called the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is what happens. Suffering is what we add to what happens. Pain is the direct experience. Suffering is the story we tell ourselves about the experience. Pain is unavoidable. Suffering is created by our resistance to pain. But here's where it gets really interesting. This resistance to pain is not just an individual psychological quirk. It's built into the very structure of how we think about ourselves and our relationship to life. We have this deep-seated belief that we shouldn't have to experience difficulty, that a good life is one where everything goes smoothly, that we deserve to be happy and comfortable all the time. This belief creates what Watts called the double bind of existence. We expect life to be easy, but life is inherently difficult. We demand certainty, but life is fundamentally uncertain. We want permanence, but everything is constantly changing. We seek security, but existence is inherently insecure. We're constantly fighting against the basic nature of reality itself. This fight is what creates the deepest forms of human suffering. It's not just that bad things happen to us. It's that we believe bad things shouldn't happen to us. It's not just that we experience pain. It's that we think pain means something has gone wrong. It's not just that life is difficult. It's that we're constantly surprised and outraged that life is difficult. Watts saw that this resistance to difficulty comes from a fundamental misunderstanding about what it means to be alive. We think we're separate, isolated individuals who are supposed to be in control of our experience. We believe we're entitled to happiness, comfort, and security. We imagine that if we just try hard enough, plan well enough, and make the right choices, we can create a life without suffering. But what if this entire framework is wrong? What if difficulty isn't a sign that something has gone wrong, but a sign that something is going right? What if challenges aren't obstacles to overcome, but invitations to grow? What if suffering isn't a problem to be solved, but a teacher to be welcomed? This doesn't mean being masochistic or seeking out pain for its own sake. It means recognizing that difficulty is not the enemy of a good life. It's an essential ingredient of a full life. It means understanding that you can't have the peaks without the valleys. You can't have joy without sorrow. You can't have growth without challenge. Think about the things in your life that have meant the most to you, that have shaped you most profoundly, that have taught you the most important lessons. Chances are, many of them involved some form of difficulty, struggle, or loss. The relationship that taught you what love really means might have been the one that ended painfully. The job that helped you discover your true calling might have been the one you were fired from. The experience that gave you the most wisdom might have been the one that brought you to your knees. This is because difficulty has a unique power to break us open, to crack through our defenses, to strip away our illusions, and to reveal what we're really made of. When everything is going smoothly, we can coast along on autopilot, maintaining our familiar patterns and comfortable assumptions. But when life gets difficult, we're forced to dig deeper, to discover resources we didn't know we had, to question beliefs that no longer serve us. Suffering, in other words, is often life's way of getting our attention, of waking us up from our sleepwalking, of inviting us to grow beyond who we thought we were. It's not punishment for doing something wrong. It's curriculum for becoming who we're meant to be. But here's the crucial point that Watts emphasized. This transformation only happens when we stop fighting the difficulty and start working with it. When we resist our suffering, when we rage against our circumstances, when we demand that things be different than they are, we close ourselves off from whatever gift the difficulty might be offering us. It's like being caught in quicksand. The more you struggle against it, the deeper you sink. But if you relax, if you stop fighting, if you work with the medium rather than against it, you can actually float. The same principle applies to emotional and psychological suffering. The more you fight against your difficult emotions, the more stuck you become in them. But when you stop resisting, when you allow them to be there, when you even welcome them as messengers, they often transform naturally. This doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up on improving your circumstances. It means approaching your difficulties from a different place, not from victimhood but from curiosity, not from resistance but from acceptance, not from fear but from trust. It means asking not, "Why is this happening to me?" but, "What is this here to teach me?" Not, "How can I make this go away?" but, "How can I work with this skillfully?" This shift in perspective can transform your entire relationship with suffering. Instead of seeing yourself as someone to whom bad things happen, you begin to see yourself as someone who is capable of learning from whatever happens. Instead of feeling like a victim of circumstances, you begin to feel like a student of life. Instead of being defeated by difficulties, you begin to be strengthened by them. But Watts went even deeper than this practical approach to dealing with difficulty. He saw that at the most fundamental level, what we call suffering is based on an illusion. The illusion that we are separate from life, that we are isolated individuals to whom things happen, that we are subjects experiencing objects. When you see through this illusion, when you recognize that you are not separate from the flow of existence, but are the flow of existence expressing itself as you, then suffering takes on a completely different quality. You realize that you're not someone who is having experiences. You are experiencing itself. You're not someone to whom life is happening. You are life happening as someone. This recognition doesn't eliminate the experience of pain or difficulty, but it eliminates the sense of being victimized by pain and difficulty. When you stub your toe, there's still pain, but there's no sense of "poor me" being afflicted by pain. When you lose someone you love, there's still grief, but there's no sense of being separate from the grief, no resistance to the grief, no story about how the grief shouldn't be happening. The pain becomes pure experience rather than personal suffering. The difficulty becomes part of the natural flow rather than an unwelcome interruption. The challenges become expressions of life's creativity rather than evidence of life's cruelty. This is what the Buddha meant when he taught that suffering comes from attachment, and what Jesus meant when he said to take up your cross and follow. It's what the Stoics meant when they taught that we suffer not from events themselves, but from our judgments about events. It's what every wisdom tradition has pointed to in its own way, the recognition that our resistance to what is creates more suffering than what is itself. But how do you actually live this understanding? How do you move from intellectual recognition to embodied wisdom? How do you stop creating suffering while still caring about life, still working to improve things, still being fully human? The key, according to Watts, is to learn what he called the art of skillful participation. Instead of trying to control life, you learn to dance with it. Instead of demanding that circumstances conform to your preferences, you learn to respond creatively to whatever circumstances arise. Instead of insisting that reality be different than it is, you learn to work skillfully with reality as it is. This doesn't mean becoming a doormat or accepting abuse or injustice. It means choosing your battles wisely, responding rather than reacting, and approaching even necessary conflicts from a place of inner peace rather than inner turmoil. It means recognizing that you can work passionately for change while holding your outcomes lightly. You can care deeply about results while not being attached to results. You can have strong preferences while not being enslaved by your preferences. You can feel emotions fully while not being controlled by emotions. You can engage completely with life while not taking life so personally that every setback feels like a personal attack. This is the middle way that Watts learned from Buddhism. Not the extreme of passionate attachment that creates suffering, and not the extreme of cold detachment that avoids suffering by avoiding life, but the dynamic balance of caring engagement without desperate clinging. When you live this way, you discover something remarkable. You can actually feel more deeply, love more completely, and engage more fully with life when you're not desperately trying to control outcomes. When you're not constantly protecting yourself from potential suffering, you're free to be more vulnerable, more open, more alive. It's like the difference between swimming in a life jacket and swimming without one. The life jacket might make you feel safer, but it also prevents you from diving deep, moving freely and really experiencing the water. When you take off the life jacket of trying to control everything, you might feel more vulnerable, but you also become capable of much greater intimacy with life itself. This intimacy with life includes intimacy with its difficult aspects. You stop trying to edit out the parts of existence that make you uncomfortable and start embracing the full spectrum of human experience. You realize that trying to have only the pleasant emotions is like trying to have only the peaks of mountains. It's impossible, and it misses the point. The valleys give meaning to the peaks. The sorrow gives depth to the joy. The endings give preciousness to the beginnings. The uncertainty gives excitement to the security. The suffering gives sweetness to the relief. You can't have one without the other, and trying to do so only creates more suffering. When you truly accept this, something beautiful happens. You stop being at war with half of life and start being at peace with all of life. You stop seeing suffering as evidence that something has gone wrong and start seeing it as evidence that you're fully alive, fully human, fully participating in the grand adventure of existence. This doesn't mean you stop working to reduce unnecessary suffering in yourself and others. It means you do this work from a place of compassion rather than resistance, from love rather than fear, from acceptance rather than denial. You work to heal suffering while not being afraid of suffering. You try to prevent pain while not being terrified of pain. You become what Watts called a wounded healer, someone who has learned to transform their own suffering into wisdom and compassion, and who can therefore help others transform their suffering as well. You don't offer false comfort or easy answers, but you offer the deeper comfort of understanding and the more sustainable answer of acceptance. This is the ultimate truth about suffering that Watts discovered. It's not something to be eliminated, but something to be transformed. It's not an enemy to be defeated, but a teacher to be honored. It's not a sign that life has failed, but a sign that life is working exactly as it's supposed to. Suffering cracks us open so that more light can get in. It breaks down our defenses so that we can love more deeply. It strips away our illusions so that we can see more clearly. It humbles our ego so that we can connect more authentically. It teaches us compassion by giving us something to be compassionate about. When you understand this, you can embrace your difficulties not because you enjoy them, but because you trust them. You can welcome your challenges not because they're pleasant, but because they're purposeful. You can accept your suffering not because it doesn't hurt, but because you know it's helping you become who you're meant to be. And in doing so, you discover that the very thing you thought was your enemy was actually your teacher all along. The very experience you thought was preventing you from being happy was actually what was preparing you for a deeper, more authentic happiness. The very suffering you thought was meaningless was actually what was initiating you into the meaning that can only come from having been broken open and put back together with more wisdom, more compassion, and more love. This is the truth about suffering, according to Alan Watts. Not that it's good or bad, right or wrong, necessary or unnecessary, but that it's part of the whole, part of the dance, part of what it means to be magnificently, temporarily, gloriously human. And when you can embrace it as such, you discover that even your suffering can become a doorway to freedom.